Mm. Here we go. Hi, Aaron. How you doing? Hi, Saren. How's it going?
Hey, friends.
Just wanted to give you guys a few minutes to get on here. Saren, I like that tree in your wallpaper. That's really cool. Amazing. Great to hear. Saren, can you hear me? I'd love to know what that tree represents for you in your background. And your wallpaper, I should say. Curious. Thanks, that's in Colombia. Nice. So I wanted to introduce you guys to a few of my friends who are going to start going live in our group. I'm trying to... Looks like you're talking, but I think your sound is off. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Aaron?
She may have been referring to me, but I think you guys are good, yeah?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Solo off. So I'd like to introduce you guys to my friends Corey and Christelle. They are going to be going live and they're going to be talking about spirituality topics. They're going to be talking about things like Taoism and Advaita Vedanta, knowing who you are, knowing your true nature. And I think this is a very important time right now, especially as we go into some tougher times that lie ahead here. But they are going to show you guys that you do not have to be afraid during this time coming up. Because just because the world around you is afraid, just because the world around you is terrified of what could happen, does not mean that you have to be afraid. And what happens is, I should say, it doesn't mean you have to be terrified. Yes, there may be a little fear, which is human. Yes, there may be a little stress, anxiety, which is human. But this does not have to absolutely consume your life. It does not have to. However, there is a caveat, though. This is not something that you can just think your way out of. It's not something that you can just believe that everything's okay. Meanwhile, your cells are telling you something different. Meanwhile, your biological level is telling you something different. So it's not about what you believe, it's about what you know to be true in the absolute sense. It's that you are here and that right in this moment you are breathing, you are alive, you can feel the aliveness running through your body. And because of that, everything is perfect, even if it does not look that way, as according to the way that your mind is projecting your life situation and your circumstance. So I would like to go ahead and hand it over to Corey and Christelle and see if you guys would have anything to add on top of that. So go ahead. Let's hear what you got to say.
Thanks, brother. It's great to be here again with you, even though we can't see you right now, but I saw you on the live, so it's all good. But yeah, I mean, I really echo what you were saying. I feel like, as I was mentioning to you just before this when we were on our call, for me, there has been a kind of an energy and then kind of an openness of relief an energy of a certain permission, in a sense, to come back to oneself and to really use this time as an opportunity to come to this moment and to be conscious of everything that we interact with. Even if we're just looking at the simple idea of washing our hands, or simply being more in tune with our daily processes of our moment to moment experience, how we're fending for ourselves and our family, how we're keeping ourselves safe and feeling safe. These are all really basic and simple human things that really we do all the time, though due to the potential nature of our livelihood and our pursuit of happiness and our desire to manifest some goal or some outcome, many times these things kind of get skipped over. And we see this in spirituality a lot as well. It's as if there's an ongoing seeking to find the next glamorous tool, like the next meditation, the next great perspective, the next amazing experience. And that at times can move us away from just the simple ways of being and the simple things that we have to focus on each moment and each day. So with or without this crisis, there's a call to action to come to this present moment and come to connect with ourselves and come to connect with the moment to moment experience that we have. And then with something like this, in so many ways, it just brings a magnifying glass to everything. It brings a magnifying glass to our ability to stay present and stay calm and to recognize it's not just about feeling calm within, in the sense of that's the only thing that's important for ourselves to feel good. Of course, that's a primary, though we also do have a duty to support those around us and to be compassionate and to be a light for them in a time where there can be an enormous amount of challenge and upset. So that's the initial things that are coming through me.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel?
Mm-hmm. Well, we were having a delicious salad this evening, and
It was good.
right before I had a moment where we had talked about something really serious that could happen, this entire outburst, and it was the first time I felt fear at the last 3 weeks. I was like, oh, it's interesting. So I like relaxed and breathed, composed, and felt the feelings, and told myself it was okay that I feel afraid. And then as soon as I sat down to eat, I was like, we both are very in tune with mindful eating and deep prayer, and it was like even magnified. So sometimes the feeling of fear, when you allow it to be there and you love it and you say it's okay, you're there, it can really deepen the rapture of reverence and gratitude. Because here I was now, after preparing the meal and then sitting there and looking at this salad and saying, wow, like this could very well be the last time I eat or not, like who knows, like this could. And I was just like, I feel so blessed. Like, look how beautiful this is, and I can't wait to eat this. And thank you so much. So, I definitely agree with you. Practical mindfulness for me is my biggest tool, and the little things matter. And it's what those little things that you feel deep peace with as you go on with your day helps to kind of balance out the natural fears that come from so much of these changes.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm a little jealous of that salad you guys ate. You guys made it seem like the best salad that you've ever eaten in your life, and I'm just like, wow,
You kind of felt like it.
I bet. But it's kind of interesting you put it that way, Corey. That like there's so many little things that we do in our life that but because we're like on autopilot with them, we barely even recognize them. Whereas like something as beautiful as just washing your hands and being there with that, right? As opposed to like doing it because you're afraid or because you're afraid of getting sick or whatever the case is. Now you're like washing your hands as if that's the only thing on the face of the planet that matters. Or just whatever experience it is you're doing, whether it's you're eating breakfast or taking a walk, walking your dog, even being here right now, being here on this live right now. Nothing else matters on the face of the planet. I mean, logically it does. According to the mind, yes, we still have to prepare. There's still things that we have to be responsible for. But right now, right, nothing else matters. That's the only way that I can really, truly, fully be here with you right now, is if nothing else matters. Because
Mhm.
if I have a bunch of different things on my mind right now, then I can't truly be here with what is. If my mind's constantly going. And Christelle, I also love what you say in terms of the fear, because a lot of people think that if you're afraid, you're automatically in the future, which isn't always the case. And here's what I mean. Have you ever been driving and you've been like so on autopilot because you were like so worried about like what you like the bills you have to take care of or whatever the case may be, and then all of a sudden you almost hit someone and boom, your perception magnified by like 1,000. All of a sudden you went from like in the mind and in your experience and everything to just boom in the moment. So
Mhm.
in that way, that fear actually helped you get out of the dream of thinking. So if we can take that same principle, right, and we can utilize our fear instead of the fear working against us, the fear can work for us by making us conscious. Then we can have the mental clarity and the mental stability to do what we need to do, as compared to our brain being scrambled. Like, I don't even know what my next move should be because we're so used to preparing that sometimes we get stuck and we don't really know what to do because we're so in prepare mode that our brains become scrambled and then we do nothing, right? um by the way, I actually have a little pain in me right this second. I'm not sure where that's coming from, so I have to calm down a little bit here. Um, but what you'll notice is that a lot of times that fear arises by itself. It's not like you consciously go after fear. Why would you ever consciously go after being afraid? You don't choose it. It just happens, right? And so we can sit back and watch all this stress and this you know anxiety and fear just arise by itself. But we don't have to build and attach our story around that fear. Like, I'm afraid. How do I get unafraid? I'm stressed. How do I stop being stressed? Now we just sit back and watch it instead of becoming it.
Mhm.
So, Corey or Christelle, did you guys have anything to say on top of that?
Well, for me, my practice has been with any emotion, has been observing it, but then allowing myself to feel it. That's been my own journey of when you feel the wave of fear, like you said, often you're not chasing it, it just happens, right? And so
Mm.
for me, anytime I've tried to resist it or chase it, has magnified it. And I guess for me, saying something like I said earlier, it's okay that I feel afraid right now. It's okay that I feel, because it's very different than saying I'm afraid and I feel afraid, because a feeling.
Mm.
And so for
Wow.
me, when you say I feel afraid, it's okay that I feel afraid. I literally feel that because it is a hormone, it's your fight or flight hormone moving in your body trying to help you. And so for me, when I say it's okay that I feel that, my body's like, oh, okay. And then I feel the actual hormone move rather than often when we judge, especially in the spiritual community, sometimes we say, be fearless. And so
Yeah.
then what happens is like, if we have all these judgments around fear or guilt or grief,
Mhm.
what I've noticed in myself, and you might be feeling that now, that pressure, is that sometimes when you feel like
Oh,
a big emotion, when I
go
feel a big when I feel a big emotion, if I try to resist it or judge it, it feels like it's boxed in. So imagine like my body's like the ocean, and one every wave are feelings and emotions that just move because we're humans. It's meant to move. And when I resist it, when I fight it, it's like putting that one emotion in an aquarium in the ocean. So it's like all that pressure is coming from the outside in and the inside out, and it feels so uncomfortable in the body. And I'm sure you've experienced that. And so when I acknowledge and allow it to flow, it moves, and then I feel peace again, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I
Yeah.
need to know why I feel afraid, I say I trust that I will know the deepest insight of why I feel afraid, and then I let it go, and then I receive the answers. And so it could be very gentle to love and to support the fears right now, to be both human and being like it's okay
Mm-hmm.
that I feel it, and then also being in our spirit body that can help us support us to feel these big things.
I love the fact that you said that I am not afraid, because then you're identifying with the fear as opposed to just having fear come up, and that I'm just feeling fear. I am not that fear. I love the distinguishment between that, which
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like, which is why there's such a powerful vibration and frequency in the words that you use.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's a
more
shift.
so, excuse me.
It's just a small shift. You just add one word and it changes everything. I
Yeah.
feel, you know,
I fear, or I have fear, right?
I feel
Um,
fear. Yeah.
right.
Instead of I have fear.
hmm Um, for some reason on Be Live, we're on Be Live right now, by the way. This is how we're doing our co-lives right now. For some reason, they're not showing the Facebook users' names here. So let me take a look on the actual. How do I get unafraid? I'm stressed. How do I stop? We are stressed. Now we just sit. So you can see that I'm not like, I'm still trying to figure out this Be Live here. Here we go. Um, hey Yoke, how you doing? So Monica Rhodes said, "Interesting. I've never thought of it that way. That's great. That's great that we could help bring some light. I love it." Corey, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, I feel there's an ongoing example I use quite often. I use it with both the most advanced practitioners I've worked with and the most beginner, those who are just starting. And I feel it's a universal metaphor and example that really, balances all of this. And, much of it has to do with the kind of subject-object relationship. So I have this mug here, and this mug is an object to the subject of my body-mind. And I can recognize this simply because, it's a separate object, and mainly because I can observe it through my sensations. The other thing is I can also pick it up and I can also put it down. And so there's a clear reality to the fact that, other than if I was really attached to this mug, if somebody came and picked it up and smashed it on the ground, of course the sensations may be intense, but I'm not going to necessarily feel the physical pain of the mug because of course it's separate from my physical body. But then if I have attachments to the mug, then maybe I feel some pain in certain levels. But if we keep it as practical and logical as possible, it's a clear object to the subject of my body and mind. And so when we begin the process of looking inward or coming into a place of observance inwardly, specifically our sensations, our thoughts, and our feelings, we start to begin to develop a relationship. And those who are watching right now, you can even begin this, whether your eyes are open or closed, you can just simply come to recognize that every thought that's coming and going, every sensation that's arising and falling, every emotion, every feeling that you may presently feel or have felt, these are all observable phenomena. These are all observable objects. These are things that we can observe. And so if we can observe something, just like I can pick up and put down the mug, or I can observe it as an object, there's a very simple and radical logic that it must not be me. And this is obviously a very important distinction because the majority, if not all of our suffering comes by way of the thoughts are either in a positive or naturally a negative state if we're feeling suffering, or rather our feelings are in a positive or rather negative, feeling state. But of course, we can recognize that, well, just because the thought is positive or negative isn't necessarily going to be the result of whether we're experiencing suffering. The suffering is going to come from whether or not we've identified with that illusionary aspect of ourselves, believing it to be real, believing it to be ourselves. So in other words, me thinking that this mug is me, and if it's hurt, then I'm hurt, and all these things. And of course, the irony with all of this is that we're not saying emotions or thoughts are not valid. You may have an emotion that arises, like Christelle mentioned, like the fear arises. It doesn't mean it's not valid, and it's not meant to be looked at and observed and perceived, because that's what's naturally arising, and everything that's naturally arising in each moment is calling for our attention. That's why it's there. Though the key is recognizing that we're observing it. Something's observing it. Maybe you don't know it's you, but something is observing, and this is what naturally begs the question: who is this observer? What is perceiving, or what is the subject to these thoughts and feelings and sensations? Mm-hmm. And this is really the true essence of spiritual seeking, inward seeking. It's to find not an objective God, some objective God that either someone told you is true, or that you read in a book, or you logically denounced as true, but a subjective connection to the creation, or the source of all creation. Because that's what all religious seeking is. It's to seek to find a creator, the source of all. And so we really only have our subjective experience at our disposal. And if we only have that at our disposal, we have to go to the source of our own subjective experience. And this is what I feel like we're all pointing to in this moment, is who or what is perceiving all and which is arising. And can we continue to come to that in times where the intensity of the thoughts and feelings may be so insurmountable that it's really the only place that we can go. Mm-hmm. And this is what I feel we're all going to come to at some point, whether in this life or another, and probably everyone on this call. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love the way. I got a quick question for you. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by subject and object? I've always had a hard time, I understand it to a degree, but not to a full degree. So when you say subject, how does that differ from object?
Well, we can also use the terms the perceived and the perceiver, or the observed and the observer. There's something in which is being observed, and there's something in which is observing it. And, many times as we come into connections with our non-dual nature, the true source of our being, which is not so much in left and right, good and bad, right and wrong, love and fear. It's embodied in a sense of being in which encapsulates all of that. This is where the observed and the observer can begin to merge. And this is the feelings of oneness at times when we experience it. Maybe we're in nature, or we're connecting with somebody, looking them in the eye, or just feeling the presence of something we love. It's as if what is being perceived as what is separate, like a separate human or an animal or nature itself. It's not separate. It's actually you. And you feel that there's no distance, although, in the physical dimension, we may perceive that distance, but we feel at the depth of our being that there's this connectivity. And so that's where, ironically, that confusion is so valid, in the sense that maybe the observed and the observer are both one and the same, though in the practical light, to answer your question, I feel that's sometimes a better term. What is being observed, what is being witnessed, and who or what is witnessing, or who or what is observing. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so interesting to me when you put it that way, that as you're talking about, the observed and the observer have always been one, right? But not in our experience on a human level, because our brains, right? Our brains and our biology and everything is experiencing being only the subject, being a separate subject, meaning that our brain is actually, that's actually kind of, to me, where the fear actually comes from, is that we're so enamored with this, with what's being observed, right? That our brain literally starts to, fear goes in on a brain level, and our brains are hurting. And that's kind of because I like to bring the kind of it feels unreal to the mind itself. It feels kind of unreal when you talk about what's being observed when the mind is so fixated, right, on that mug. The mind's always been so used to being fixated on the mug that it hasn't that it barely has any noticeable difference between itself and the mug, right?
Mm.
So when you talk about the observed and the observer, it sounds unreal to the mind, right? So how does that actually look then, right? If we want to take it to the external so that the mind can kind of get it, so that the mind can kind of lose itself, right? You got to look at what is this actually doing on a cellular level. To me, that's how you make it more real to someone who's so used to being the subject. And to me, what this comes back to, because I've contemplated this quite a bit in my meditation, what is the point of feeling one with someone on a cellular level? What's it do to you biologically, right? And to me, what it does is no longer do I even have to perceive you. And if I don't have to worry about perceiving you, that relaxes my whole nervous system, my whole brain. My brain can relax, right? My brain can relax. I can be here in the moment and I can be gentle. Gentle. And not only will, instead of me trying to perceive you, now I can instead feel you, feel where you're coming from, feel where the words are pointing. Not trying to uh feel whether I agree with you or not, or whether I believe what you're saying is true or not. Now I just feel you and I feel I get where I know where he is coming from instead of understanding where he's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I can truly relax here with what is.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Yes.
Christelle, did you want to go ahead?
Oh,
She's just feeling.
I'm feeling the beautiful vibes here, all the energy that's around. Absolutely. I'm feeling the one, um, what you describe on why would we want to experience oneness, right, with another. I feel
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was like 2 years ago. I had been studying Tantra for a while, Taoist Tantra,
Mm.
and I was like, I don't want to be the Tantra lover to just one person because I wouldn't be fair. There's a lot of pressure, and it seems like I would be constantly in conflict. I want to become and embody the tantric lover to self and to life so that everything I do comes from that place. It's not just here,
Mm.
maybe there. And so everything for me became my deepest intention was to come from that place where, and to help my brain realize that it's like that. So, for example, like we were the salad that we've been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
While I'm preparing our meal, he's working, and I'm really with the vegetables, right? I'm taking some time of deep gratitude of thinking like how long it has taken for these vegetables to grow, and now it's going to be like me soon, right? And having that deep reverence as we're preparing the food, and then as I sit down, it's right now it's the object, right? Like I'm looking at it, it's a relationship. It seems like two, and it really is, but in a moment, it's going to become me. So what's my relationship with it? How is it starting? And so that place of deep appreciation and rapture, and then taking my time to eat it slowly and to be gentle and tender is what helps my brain and body recognize that what we've been discussing, why it's so important to embody that, to remind the brain that all is one, and yet relationship is still occurring at the same time,
Mm.
because it really is, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also too it was a great quote or just statement that I heard from a teacher a couple of years ago. And he was using the religious context of the Holy Spirit, a Christian reference, although he was more of a, non-denominational, non-dogmatic teacher. But he used the term because it was really reflective in how he was, approaching the conversation. And it was really along the lines of the fact of when one realizes the Holy Spirit within, the movement of that universal force within that creates everything. For one to experience that in its fullest light, the highest experience on this dimension is to experience that with another who has also realized that Holy Spirit within, because that's where the almost like a third interaction occurs, where that dance can really move, which in essence is the teachings of true tantric methods, not always from a relationship or two people perspective, but the union of that dance where we can simultaneously be embodied in that nothingness, that pure awareness, that pure stillness, that absolute truth, and yet be fully immersed in, as we're all mentioning here, that feeling state, connecting in the most raw and human way, which is the strength we have in a human body. Really, it's the gift and blessing we have to be in these bodies, is to be able to experience the true rawness and, in a sense, kind of chaotic explosion of emotion, which, again, for one who's become so identified with emotion, naturally it becomes their poison. It's like having a herb. A herb can be a healer and also can be a killer, a poison. And so we have to recognize that and find our balance. But as we do, then we can simultaneously exist within both realms, where we're realized and transcended in the truth of our being, but yet embodied and experiencing, the naturalness of the now moment and life and how everything wants to arise. That is generally spontaneous, because, in the best moments of my own life, they've just been spontaneous. The best moments I've ever had, I could have never planned them. So when I look at all the things I've tried to plan, all the moments I've tried to create and manifest and all this, which has its place, but more as a structure and a container to allow for the innocent spontaneity to just simply arise, gracefully.
The mystery. Yeah. Getting comfortable with mystery.
Mm-hmm.
I love Osho's quote, courage is a love affair with the unknown.
Yum. Yeah.
Which is extra challenging when you're trying to prepare for coronavirus, right? It's hard it's almost like the fear cuts you off from that spontaneity, because now you're thinking so far ahead that you're just like, you know what I'm saying? Like you almost like become robotic, and like your every move, it's like at 7:05 p.m. I have to be here. At 7:10 I have to be here. At 7:15 I have to go to the grocery store so I have enough food, etc., right? But that to me is where, when you're talking about what is observing the subject, what that actually does by that observing it, and it's actually a neutral observation. Because one thing I've noticed kind of like in the personal growth space is that awareness is this like superpower, right? Awareness, right? But then the challenge with that is that awareness becomes subjective. But my point is, there has to be this all-pervasive awareness that rises beyond subjectivity, meaning that the awareness that I have of that mug is the same awareness that you have of that mug, is the same awareness that not even that you have of that mug, but that you are. And so what that actually does is, by being aware of what is coming and going, it actually gives your brain a chance to relax, and that's when you feel that ecstasy just run through your veins. That's when you feel that like tingly sensation of aliveness just run through you, just burst through you. Blow like forgot what it was saying. Have you heard of the book Perfect Brilliant Stillness by David
I heard
Carr?
of it, but
I
I haven't read it.
He says, I think it was a Rumi quote where light just bursts you open into an infinite universes. It was a quote. Well, I can't recall what it was, but it was really cool. But I cannot give you this awareness with words because you are this awareness. I can't give you what you already are, which is why words are always pointers to the moon, and it is the moon that is who you are. Is that who I am? Um, I really like what you said earlier about the vegetables, like how long it took to grow, and like really having gratitude. Could you explain a little bit more of what you mean by your relationship with food? Like, what is it about the relationship that you have with food that that's a big deal, I guess. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Mhm. Often people ask me if I'm like vegan, like, like it's spiritual, like how do you eat? And I often say like I'm an intuitive eater.
Mm-hmm.
So I most of the time, if not all the time, I ask my existence, do you want this? And I feel my body respond.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And
Oh.
so, and sometimes I really want something like chocolate or like, I'm asking, I'm like, I really want this. And it's like a deep, like right now in this moment, you can't have that. And it's like, okay. And I
Mm.
have to like let it go and like respect. And so it's like an invitation to have a deeper relationship with your entire, like the body and the eternal self as one. And when you can have that more deeply, you recognize that anything that you're consuming, whether it's information, water, food, it is a relationship at first. It seems like two, right? Food is my plate was right in front of me. It's two. But eventually it's going to become one. It's going to be in my body. So what is my relationship with it?
Mm.
And for me, how I feel the healthiest is when I'm in that place of deep appreciation where I can recognize, like you said, that awareness that is in everything. So is this in this vegetable too. Like it is a life. It was a life, and it's going to be my life. So how do I feel about that?
Mm.
And the more I can align in that in my relationship with it with deep gratitude, the more I taste it. And then the more I taste it, the more I feel what it's doing to my body. How is my body responding to it? Does it love it or not? And this is how I continue knowing how to move with what you call my nutrition, is how my body is physically responding to food. And
Mm.
at the same time, it's a practical thing. We all have to eat, we all drink. So what's my relationship to that? Something that seems mundane, right? And
Why?
then when I do this, I can experience that ecstatic bliss that you're talking about. Because now I'm giving myself permission to make this my deepest priority, my work, my pleasure. And because I'm not stealing those moments away with my mind, being somewhere else, I'm really there. I'm not only receiving nutrition later when I eat, but also while I'm cooking it. And then while I'm offering it to my loved ones, while I'm eating it, there's this constant nutrition of not just physical food, but from my actual eternal being receiving the chi and light because I'm so present with it.
Mm.
This helps me eat less. This helps me to receive more. And then this helps me to respect more my experience in this body.
Wow, that's amazing. I always knew there was a reason why I liked eating alone
Yeah.
because everybody likes to talk during their eating. You don't even taste your food then. And it's just like, no, I just want to eat alone. I want you to eat alone. I want you to taste your food. I want to taste my The mind is so addicted to thinking that it needs to talk,
Like,
and we need to communicate and we need to interact.
mm,
I kid you not, I really think that's one of the reasons why we waste so much food is because we don't value the food like you were saying. And that actually just kind of hit me as you were talking. It does make sense. We don't value food enough because we're not being with it. Because if we were truly being with it, we would realize why we should never waste a single piece of food on the face of the planet.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
why we're just like in that kind of like whatever, oh, it's whatever, you know what I mean? But here's the thing though, all the stores around me are empty right now with food. Like all the stores are just emptied because of the coronavirus and everything going on. I bet you people are going to think twice about the food that we waste now that we have it and we're going to be more with our food. So there is a blessing to be had from this kind of like catastrophe. It's showing us, it's going to show us really quickly what we were taking for granted, what kind of autopilot we were on, what we didn't appreciate, what kind of, grudges we held that weren't worth it. So it's here to wake us up.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a few pieces there on the food that I feel will be beneficial that I can share, and that's, and it reflects very much Christelle's path with food as well, because I mean, we had this discussion just before, Matt, about like the conversations I've shared about food in the past, and specifically the importance of it on the awakening journey, because in my view, much of my path in with food led me down the journey of just becoming lighter. We look to realize the light, L-I-G-H-T, within, the true light within, through our
Mm-hmm.
seeking, through our meditations and our inquiry. And though in the physical level, we are also destined and on a natural trajectory to become lighter, in our weight and what we are holding physically, which so much has to do with what we put in our body and how much of that we put in our body and what the quality of what we put in our body. And so, my journey from the typical standard American, or in my case, Canadian diet, if you will, that went down the path of, vegetarian and veganism, and then into fruitarian or raw vegan, and then mono diets, and just recently I did a 40-day juice fast to really cleanse out the body, which was, I have a video on it. It was the most remarkable thing of what came out of me in that time. It was mind blowing. But what I was really getting at is that entire journey, the way I guide people right now with food is coming back to what Christelle says. It very much is more so about, not always about what you're putting in the body, but what is the relationship? How do you feel about that consumption? And consumption is not just food. It's like entertainment. It's the liquids. It's the conversations. It's the media. There's so
Music.
many layers. Music, yeah, books, knowledge. There's so many layers to consumption and to how we fuel ourselves. The sunlight, nature, quality relationships. These are all ways in which energy comes within us. The breath, all of this. And so that's very much how I perceive and I communicate nutrition or being nourished, because it very much is a full spectrum conversation. The other tool that has been very helpful is that of human design. It's a system that uses the I Ching astrology and the chakra system to give you a full breakdown on your individual nature. And I pushed this away a lot in my non-dual Advaita days, because I was like, well, we don't identify with form, we don't identify with who we are and what we are. But as you embody more deeply, you come to recognize that all enlightened beings all exemplified very different energies. They were all very different people. They had very different personalities. So just because we come to know the one thing that connects us all, we manifest that in infinitely differentiated
Yeah.
ways. And that's a huge point. I'm sure you've come to too, Matt. And so human design gives a whole new look on what is the best way to consume food. Christelle is, she needs to eat in the sun. If she eats in the sun, then she can pretty much eat what she wants as long as it feels right. Like she said. For me, I gotta eat one thing at a time, like a mono meal, because I'm very primal. Some people, like you mentioned, eating alone, some people need to eat not with any noise. Other people have to eat actually with a lot of noise because that actually stimulates them in a different way. So it's a
Wow.
very vast and unique system, which I'll have to pull yours, Matt, at some point because it's an advanced system of the reading. But it's something that I like to share mainly because I feel, much of what we're sharing are universal principles here today. These are things that really can be applied for everyone, though they're going to apply themselves in different ways at different times and in different flavors. And I feel like that's the real empowering message from any teacher in these days, is that we empower each individual to really come into this wisdom through experiential practice, and we use this knowledge in a way that actually is working for each of us, and if it's not, then we have to drop it for at least the time in which it's not, and maybe revisit it and come back to it. But food is a big topic, and many obviously are probably going to be familiar with Ramana Maharshi. I know you are, Matt. And he said that someone asked him what was the most important practice outside of self-inquiry, and he said there's
Vegan.
really well, pretty much. He said what you put in your body, and specifically the abstaining from too much food, like fasting, pretty much. That was like the number one practice outside of true meditation, which is a
Wow.
remarkable statement from a sage of his caliber. So
That
so it's a great piece that you brought that up today.
yeah. It's interesting because even someone like Ramana Maharshi, whose sole focus was on self inquiry, still brought up the fact that the external was relatively important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very important for people to understand, is that self inquiry is not about rejecting the external in any way, shape, or form. In fact, self inquiry is showing you that the external is very beautiful. And in fact, it only enriches your experience with the external, because now you're seeing the external for what it is and its fleetingness, and it enriches your experience. Because when you're, for example, like on a high state of pleasure, you no longer need that pleasure for your fulfillment. And then on the opposite spectrum, when you're in pain, you know that it's also going to pass. One of my favorite Zen quotes is perfectly illustrates this. It says, "The good news is everything changes. The bad news is everything changes." And it illustrates the way that we are as human beings. We want our pleasures to last, and we want our pains to move away quickly. Um, and so we're lucky that neither we're actually absolutely lucky that neither stay. And so yeah, I would definitely like to do that. Did you say it had to do something with your chakras? You said that it had to do with like
Yeah, human design is a really advanced new system of individual divination or individual determination, meaning it's like astrology or a personality test or enneagram, numerology. These are all similar tools. Human design simply brings together, in my view, the cream of the crop of these types of systems, meaning astrology, the chakra system, and the I Ching. And it was assimilated by an individual named Ra, who kind of went through this process of downloading over 30 years this whole entire system that was really made for this new age. It's much more updated, it's more accurate, and it's very practical. It's not just this kind of airy fairy thing, or I mean, astrology certainly is airy fairy, but like people can get into this idea that these things are going to predict their future. They're going to tell them exactly what this is like, or it becomes a place of more identification. And although there's the trap with anything like that, human design is really pointed to a very simple approach in aligning with your natural design, your natural embodied essence. And that goes for every single element of your reality, from your relationships to what you consume, to the places you're best meant to be in, to your natural tendencies. It's remarkable. And I've been doing readings for people for quite a decent amount of time now. At least it feels that way because so many people have been getting them. And it's really beautiful, to see, especially in this time, because so many are looking to find, and I love it as a tool to couple with things like self-inquiry and more silent practices, because you're simultaneously connecting to this divine essence that is released from identification with any sort of way of being or natural. Am I a Gemini? Am I this? Am I that? It's something that has transcended this, and that yet we embody that energy back within our design, and we see how practical it is. And the funny thing, actually, I heard of this recently. We were speaking of Adyashanti just before, and he got a reading done by someone I know, and he said that it was 99.9% accurate.
Wow.
And that's a huge statement from someone of that caliber, right?
Wow.
Of his teaching capacity. So yeah, I'd love to do a reading with you and anyone who's feeling called. It's a
Let's
beautiful
do it.
process.
If you guys want to
Yeah.
do a reading, go ahead and you're okay with being messaged?
Yes, for sure. That'd be
Go
wonderful.
ahead and message Corey and have him go ahead and do a reading for you. It sounds very powerful to find out, like, because every time I come back to like yin and yang, how to yin and yang and the om, like all like, mesh in with each other, it brought me back to the fact that everything in our external world is infinite in its complexity.
Hmm.
So the moment that you think that you have things figured out, you have no clue. just because like of the infinite complexity of the fleetingness of the way that things are constantly always in flux. And by the time you say the world is like this, it's already changed from that point. It's already in a change. You know what I'm saying? Imagine if, like, for example, back in the early 1900s, we had this fixated view of this is how the world is back then, and we still had that today. The human race would be extinct as we know it, because the world is always in constantly flux. We have to adapt our perception as the world changes, so that way. And here's a perfect example. Like, say within the next month, we're not going to be able to live the same way we are now in another month, depending on how this virus takes place, right? We're going to have to adapt with change, or we go it's extinct, one or the other. And the only way that we can truly adapt with change is by expanding conscious awareness. That's the only true, to me, if there was ever, this kind of hit me in meditation the other day. To me, your conscious awareness, the degree of your conscious awareness is your degree of inner resistance to whatever is. And whatever is neutral, but the external is arising in and out of it. The fleetingness is arising in and out of it. And as things do come and change, they're going to send challenges our way. And our inner resistance is directly related to our state of consciousness. The more you resist to what is, the more unconscious you are. The more you allow whatever is coming challenges to flow through you, the more conscious you are. But the key with this measurement is that it's not something to be believed in or a concept to grab on and hold on to. The key to it is to let go of that concept entirely and just remain here. If you just remain here, you're automatically expanding your conscious awareness. And you're automatically, by expanding your conscious awareness now, you're automatically letting yourself not suffer. You're automatically not suffering as bad, moving forward as these challenges come towards you. But the whole point I was making is that we live in a world of infinite complexity, and if I was to sit here and meditate all day on oneness, I would be dead within a few weeks, probably. So the external absolutely has a relative importance, and that is how I feel that the reason I say it's relative is because subjectivity becomes involved when it comes to the infinite complexity. So it's hard for the human mind to determine what values we give to something in this world that are absolute. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's no values that we can say this is worth that and that's an absolute, because of the way that the infinite complexity of our brain, for example, is so infinite that you can't come to an absolute about anything when it regards to the external. And so, to answer your question, I would absolutely love to take that test with you. Maybe we can schedule a call next week, because I'm a student, by the way. I don't know anything.
I feel that. Me too. Me too. Yeah, that's a funny piece, like, and it's funny actually as you're saying it, I was filtering it through, some of the wisdom I've come to know with human design in regards to one of the centers. So they call it centers instead of chakras, but the ajna
Mm,
center, the ajna chakra,
mm,
in human design, you can have this defined or undefined, meaning that it's either a prominent aspect of your identity or it's a more fluid and open unconscious aspect of your identity. And you don't have a consistent access point or a clear access point to that energy. And in the Ajna Center, it's very much known about the concepts, the holding to concepts and certainty or uncertainty, meaning for
mm,
those that have an open Ajna, many times the challenge comes up with individuals holding to needing certainty around things, certainty around concepts and ideas. So for instance, taking a teaching like, I'm meant to be a vegan or I'm supposed to meditate only like this, they may hold an identity around that and create a certainty that that's the only way, and it creates this bigger image than what is actually real. And like you were saying, not opening to a flexible process of change and malleability. And so it was just funny as you're mentioning it, because I have an open ajna, and I've had to face that challenge, but then the wisdom comes on the other side where you learn to be more fluid and flexible within that awareness. And I feel like, as an overall message for today with the situation, is that the more you return to silent awareness, you're simply you're matching everything as it arises without an agenda, without an idea of the way it's needing to be. And so those that are having or potentially having more trouble in this time, it's generally going to come from a perspective that there's a certain way in which one may believe life or is supposed to be, or their life was unfolding and it was supposed to look like, or it's supposed to unfold in a
Mm-hmm.
certain timing or in a certain way of how it's meant to unfold. These kind of,
Route.
that, yeah, exactly, that very specific kind of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
Those are generally going to be those who are facing with more and more suffering, because there's not so much of flexibility as to what if we are to spend the next week or two just simply waking up each day without an agenda necessarily, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe you got to take care of some things to set yourself up so that you feel secure and safe. That is the most important. But outside of this, maybe there's an openness to see, maybe we can drop our plans for the next couple of weeks. Maybe we can drop the ideas that something needs to be a certain way, within context to your own life, and see what comes of that. See what kind of spontaneity can arise, and just if you can just practice of matching the moment so that you can
mm-hmm.
handle each challenge as it arises, if those challenges are going to arise, which inevitably I feel they will.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels the most balanced energy at this time, because we're all in the unknown. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I have a certain perception, and I feel I can feel into the timelines, which I feel there's a very positive one unfolding, though that doesn't mean I'm not also in the thick of all of this as well. And so we each have to be grounded, in that, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. I love the fact that, and it's almost like it. What as you're talking, I find that the media makes it very difficult to wake up with, no plans, because of the way that we're cultured to have to prepare for our future, to make sure we're setting our future, make sure we're paving a way for ourselves, to be prosperous, to survive, etc. So it makes it very difficult for the mind to just wake up and be like, I don't have a single clue what I'm going to do today. And not only do I not have a single clue, but I'm very comfortable with it. The 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 very sense of like I don't need to have a clue either.
Mhm. Mhm.
I love it.
Mhm.
How's the comments doing, Matt?
Uh, let's see here. Looks like Brian Carpenter. He's one of my moderators, by the way. Fear always
Mhm.
comes with the I thought and all conceptualization that comes with it. Brian is a very he's a very in-depth student of Zen. Very in-depth student of Zen. And that's the major reason why I brought him on as a moderator, because for my moderators, I want to bring on, I want to make sure that they are already to a degree embodying what we're talking about, as
Mm.
opposed to just coming on here and spewing a bunch of book knowledge that we don't are not actually embodying and are like day to day, moment to moment experiences. I've been deeply present like this whole conversation almost. Like I've been deeply like in tune with like everything you're saying, and it's all happening naturally. Naturally. It's all the awareness is all coming in naturally. Like because it's so ironic to me when I've had some pretty funny stories with when I've been meditating at the gym, for example, and people are like, "So what do you do when you meditate?" And I'm just like, "Do you see me doing anything?" And I had one guy say, "Yeah, you aren't you're doing a whole lot of nothing." And it's just funny that like our minds are so predicated on doing, right? That we can't really comprehend what it means to do nothing, to be nothing, to do nothing, to vanish into nothing, right? Because our we can only comprehend law of cause and effect, doership. And so I freak people out at the gym because they cannot comprehend what I'm doing, which is nothing. But I do tell people it's like although I'm not doing anything, a whole hell of a lot of stuff's going on inside. Whether it be that I'm letting hell come up and feeling hell and really burning through hell, or being blissed out because I've tuned so deeply into the now, into like pure stillness, that it just comes and takes me away, right? And I'm not attached to either at this point. I don't need, it's not that I go into my meditations wanting to feel this. Obviously, I want to feel it, but it's now like this. I don't need it anymore. I don't need, if pain comes up, then so be it. I mean, meditation for me is just witnessing from that awareness that you were talking about, what's perceiving everything, and allowing literally everything to arise, even the resistance, even the resistance to resistance, and that could go on forever. But what I explain in my ebook, by the way, my ebook's coming out, guys. One thing that I explain in that book is that a lot of minds are trapped in this infinite complexity. We're trapped in trying to figure out this external world that is in never ending flux. It's in complete fleetingness, and we're trying to figure it out, which is impossible. You can't figure out something that is never ending fleetingness, right? And so, what we're really trying to do in our meditations is actually transcend that infinite complexity. And the
Mhm.
only way to transcend infinite complexity is to know yourself as infinite simplicity. And that's what I tell people, is that this isn't deep. It's actually the opposite of being deep. It's actually infinite simplicity, which is why it's too simple to be comprehended and grasped with thought itself, presence, stillness. And that's why, by knowing it, you've also been able to transcend the infinite complexity. Think about how nauseous it is for a mind to try to locate reality in any specific place externally. It brings so much nauseousness, like so much almost like you become dizzy without even realizing it or realizing why. Because like every time you like, okay, I finally figured that out, I got that challenge done, right, I can relax now, but here comes another one right around the corner. And before you know it, you're like looking all these different directions. You're like, I got to take care of that challenge. I got to take care of that challenge. I have to get to the future. I have to get to the future. And before you know it, you're like hanging on to the past while at the same time trying to get as fast as the where, and there's, you can't get out of that. Um, you can't get out of the never ending, um, challenges and external until you breathe away the external. Find that calm center. And what you'll realize when you ask the question, who am I? When you find the answer to that, you'll also realize, where am I? Christelle, did you have anything to add?
Earlier, when you talked about how you feel like when you finally get something, it changes. I feel like that's how parenting is for me. And it has allowed me to really move away from getting stuck and rigid. Every time there's like a milestone with my son since he was born, you think you have this like schedule going or this understanding of how they work, and then they just change again. And you're just like, all right. And then what I had to learn through trial and experience was sometimes when they started to have a bit of friction in a relationship with our son, it was that we were unconsciously trying to do the same thing we were doing before with him now, not
Mm.
recognizing that it had evolved, that he had evolved, and we had evolved, and the mind wasn't getting the memo.
Mm.
Um, so being a parent has really allowed me and has taught me on how to be as much as I can present in the moment and not get stuck or attached to a way of being or an identity or like my son APs yesterday and he always loved them. Doesn't mean he's gonna love them today. you know? And so it's like retraining the mind of not being stuck on how things are. Um, Ali, a friend of ours, said, today's insight is tomorrow's prison.
Mm,
And I love that. And it has always stayed with me.
wow. Wait,
Mhm.
repeat that. Can you repeat
So,
that?
yeah, today's insight is tomorrow's prison.
I'm gonna write that in the comment section.
Mhm. It's really powerful.
That's so true because I've noticed when I've tried to bring my experiences of like nirvana and meditation into the next one,
Mhm.
that knowledge grabbed a hold of me.
And then you feel irritated or frustrated or something. Yeah. And you
Or
know, the idea you said earlier about pleasure and pain, I was like thinking about that. You know, pleasure, pain, peace, passion, they all start with P's, you know, kind of cool.
oh,
Um, but when you allow every experience, like you said, to be the experience, right? I felt like that presence a moment ago of really being here with us. When you allow each moment to be as and you're fully present with it, you can experience the full pleasure out of it, the full peace out of it, and the passion. And the same thing with pain, right? I had a couple weeks ago, now it's about a month ago, I lost someone I really love who passed away. And thanks to where I'm at today, I'm able to really understand in my body what grief is like. And so I had allowed myself to go into grief because it was coming up naturally, right? I wasn't trying to force myself and allowed myself to cry and to feel the emotions. And yet there was so much peace and contentment in feeling that sadness. And there was almost joy because I was like, oh, finally it's coming up. It's beautiful. Thank you. You know, I felt like I was being emptied and then moved on with my day with still more peace. And so I feel like you're saying it's true. Like you don't want to grasp at what gives you peace, but if you allow each moment to be as it is and to be with it fully in the relationship, there is peace there. There is pleasure there. There is passion there.
that's amazing. Grief, wow, that's one of the strongest, most intense emotions. And I've
Hmm.
not even really gotten a real glimpse of it, so I don't even really imagine. But I can kind of imagine that grief's one of the more intense emotions. And I'm sure you can testify to that.
Yes, yes, yes. But I
Yeah.
think it's because we don't know what to do with it. I
Yeah.
think it's because we've lost the art of grief.
Hmm.
And um,
Hmm.
we live in a world that has overglorified chasing happiness. And if you're not happy, here's a pill, you know. And
Yep.
I'm not against medicine. I understand that there's medicine and it has helped so many people, but
Mm-hmm.
yet we have chased happiness. And because of that, when we feel bigger emotions like guilt, grief, things like that, anger, we just don't know what to do with them. And so we avoid them, we stuff them down, or we get consumed by them too, right? There's like the other
Mm-hmm.
spectrum.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I feel like things like grief is a conversation to its own. Things like the word love, we use the word love so much in the spiritual movement, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like, but love is a conversation. Let's have that because it's
Mm-hmm. Hmm. You know, it's interesting you say that because I'll literally watch myself go into like super, super like deep meditation and like be high on cloud nine, right? And literally not even 24 hours later, my brain will be like, no, you're not going to stop. And it's almost like I can sit and watch the fact that I don't have any control over the way that I'm feeling. You know, like say my brain's like tired or stressed or like clogged up or whatever the case may be. And I'll literally watch. The fact that I have no control over that. It's not a matter of just like, oh, just I'll just snap on present. Oh, I'll just think positive. So to me, what
Mm-hmm.
grief seems to me like is that there's no control at all over whatever's coming up. There's no like bringing your knowledge into it, something you read from a book, even certain insights that you've had in meditation previously. There's nothing. You just have to go through that, and that's all there is to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
And I've had those moments.
you can still be present with that too, though, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
saying you're the awareness and you're aware of of like the feelings that are occurring, but that's
Mm-hmm.
present to itself. You're being present with what's arising, and in that moment, it's it's the wave of grief, right?
And that is so graceful. It's just like falling into grace when you can sit and be okay with losing control.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Corey, my man, how you doing?
I'm feeling great, brother. It's been great to connect with you together, with Christelle, and all of you, all those watching.
Mm-hmm.
It's our first time obviously doing a live together, and I feel the connection with the group. I mean, I'm watching some of the comments, and there's a certain engagement, and I just want to, yeah, like bring a sense of acknowledgement to each of you in this time, for spending this time to be here and to connect and to do it in this way, because although we're not necessarily practicing any specific meditation today other than a few moments of silence, the
Mm,
entirety of this type of discussion is meditative, and as we kind of surrender into that bubble, this really creates a ripple effect. It really strengthens the energy. It gives a sense of clarity and hope to know that if times do get rough or challenging, or there are, shortages of things or lockdowns or all the things that can happen in the world this time, there is still that connectivity that we have to our own being and to those who also match in that vibrational energy as well. And this is where the more we surrender to the balancing and the alignment of our home vibration, coming back not necessarily to a higher vibration, but to our home vibration, our natural self,
mm.
when we feel just simply in content, like a blissfulness that comes on the foundation of content and peace and alignment. This is what guides the way. This is where you get the insights from that higher self, from the inner self, from the inner knower that needs to guide you to where you need to be on the planet this time, who you're meant to be connected with, what you're meant to be doing. These things will all naturally be guided. And this is, I feel, you know, one of the more important messages, so that we kind of connect to that sense of trust. That although we may be practicing and we may be connected to this sense of presence and awareness and being mindful to the moment, naturally there is a lot of chaos and energy on the planet this time. And so we have to be willing to connect to something, to have faith in something, to have faith in ourselves, to have faith in this home vibration that many could share. And, you, Matt, bringing this group together and all the other moderators, and then bringing these calls and these lives together is such a beautiful thing. It's such an important thing. So yeah, just kind of a moment to acknowledge that and bring some gratitude there.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Hmm.
And the thing is, just as everything's always in a constant flow, because we live in this external, and I was telling Ezra that the whole external world is like a measurement. It's like one big gigantic measurement of how did things look according to our mind before, how do they look now, and how are they going to look. It's all one just big gigantic measurement. And so this universal awakening group is just getting started. We are going to collectively lift the vibration of the planet. We're going to collectively bring everyone up to the light. I've been kind of resonating with that word light, so I'm glad you brought it up earlier. Um, because it's clear that it's needed right now. It's clear that people, it's not that they need us, it's that they need us to show them that they need them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that we're really kind of doing in a way, is just showing you that you only really need you. And you don't even really need us for that once you know that. But then it just becomes about a community. It becomes about a community and about sharing different experiences, different perspectives. Um, and when you truly, and this is the great thing about the paradox, right? When you've awakened to who you are, you see how paradoxical, how infinite everything is complexity. You can start seeing, you can start looking at people's opinions and their perspectives. And even if you may completely disagree with them, you can be perfectly okay with yourself in that moment, to the point that you don't have to lash out to them about how they're wrong or about how they're ignorant or they're an idiot, because now you see, oh, they're coming from their perspective with their experiences, and everything is a paradox, and everything I believe to be true is not the truth. And everything I don't believe to be true is also not the truth. That
Mm-hmm.
way, everybody can have their opinions, their perspectives, and we can just honor the fact that everything is paradoxical and that there isn't really any specific truth in the external, and that we can be like, oh, I see where you're coming from. This is how I feel. I'm not attached to it, but this may help you out, type thing. You know what I mean? I've gained a lot of insight on this call, and I appreciate that. And I did want to let you guys know that Serenity Bliss, what a name, right? Serenity Bliss said, I would love a reading that you mentioned. I have messaged you. Thank you, beautiful people, Matthew, Corey, and Christelle. So Serenity Bliss is going to message you about a reading. Um, I did want to let everybody know on this live that um, Corey and Christelle are going to be going live periodically, and now they are your brother and your sister, and they are going to be sharing their insight. Oh, that reminds me, by the way, this is completely off topic, but I was hanging out with my niece the other day. She's 6 years old, right? And I was sitting there talking to her as my niece. And so I was like, do you know how we were on the trampoline? I got on the trampoline with her and we were acting crazy. And I, like, when we sat down, I was like, do you know how I'm related to your sister? And she's like, yeah, you're her brother. I was like, and do you know who you are to, or what I am to you? And she said, yeah, my uncle. I said, okay, and what are you to me? And she's like, my grand sister.
So cute.
I will never ever forget that.
That's so sweet.
The innocence was hilarious. All right, well, I have to get going. I'm gonna do a little meditation now. I am absolutely thrilled that you guys are kind of like helping with everything now. And if you guys need anything, go ahead and message me, and we'll stay in touch. All right.
Thank
Blessings.
you so
Thanks, Matt.
much.
Thanks, everyone. Connect soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Later.